everyone, Pastor Robbie. I'm back with another Sunday video. Today, it's a fun one, so let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it. Receive this word from Scripture. And the crowd came together again so that they could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him, for the people were saying, "He's gone out of his mind." And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, He has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of the demons he casts out demons. And he called to them and spoke to them in parables. How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but his end has come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. And then indeed the house can be plundered. Truly I tell you, people will be forgiven for their sins and whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, but is guilty of eternal sin. For they had said, "He has an unclean spirit." Then his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent for him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brother and sisters are outside asking for you." And he replied, Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking around at those who sat with him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I was skimming through Twitter a few days ago, and someone posted this little map of, it was like a map to nightlife in Harlem in 1932. And I know, like a random way of opening a message as well, right? But look at this thing real quick. There's so many little tidbits from this era 90 years ago that really make like that distant era kind of like come alive. You know, there's the Cotton Club and Cab Calloway's band. You see Cab Calloway there singing, you know. You go up the street and you can see, you know, you can go to Tilly's if you want to have some really good fried chicken. And Bill Bojangle Robinson is the world's greatest tap dancer. And it looks like he's tap dancing with his golden gun in his hand. And you know, over here, I love this little note from Club Hot Cha. "Nothing happens before 2 a.m. and ask for Clarence." It's cool. It's just a great little glimpse into the life of another era. Harlem towards the end of the Great Depression, when places like New York were starting to reclaim the energy that had been so like intimately connected to their identity. You know, it's like, where did you want to be at this specific moment in time? Well, if you wanted to be in the middle of everything, these are the places, right? And not just the places, these are the people that you want to see. And not just like the performers like Cab Calloway, but here are people like Clarence who will make things happen for you as well, right? It's cool. But it reveals this like funny little thing, you know, like this desire to be an insider, to have the inside track on someone or something. You know, you've got the knowledge, you've got the connections that everyone else wants to have, right? I don't know if this happens to you in your hometown, but like where I live, you know, it's a place where a lot of people want to come visit, you know. So here in San Francisco, I'm always one of the first people in my friend groups that they will call because they want the scoop on what to do here. And, you know, I'm by far not the only person in San Francisco, obviously, right? And then there are people who know the city way better than I do. But I know the city better than, let's say, like a Google search, right? If you Googled things to do in San Francisco, you would get a list of, you know, things that are all within 5 to 10 blocks of our house. But what it won't tell you until maybe, you know, page 5 or 6, you know, on the search are like the hidden little gems around the city, right? You know, like the specific questions that you ask, not just where do I want to eat, but where do I want to eat if I'm out by Ocean Beach? or I saw the Full House houses. What should I do once I see the Full House houses? Well, I'm the insider that can tell you things that maybe aren't on a normal top 10 list, right? But might be the best option for you. Santung in the Richmond district, and then pretty much everywhere else. Like, just figure out where El Pastor Papi is, right, and go have some amazing tacos. We do this thing in some ways, like all over the place, really. I can be the insider at work, right? Like when a new person comes in, I can help pave the way for them to figure out not just like the logistical ins and outs of like the physical space, but also like the connections that will help a new employee navigate the culture of the office that we're in. We did it in school, especially around middle school, right? Like that's when kids are really starting to worry about like what's cool and what's, you want to avoid. If you're a kid that's an early adapter to those systems, right, you're going to have a step up on, the competition, and you can wield some influence, over the rest of your classmates. And it can be a gift, really, right? Like a lifeline to those who struggle, in that kind of emotional cesspool that, is middle school. Instead of floundering without a clue, the later adapters can observe the path of those early adapters and kind of follow along what they see other people doing. Listen, we even do this stuff in church. If you're a member of our local church here in San Francisco, think of like the specific insiders, right? Who would you talk to if you were curious about, like, say, a charter member, right? Or like one of the earlier eras of our church. Our church is 70 years old, so you probably wouldn't come talk to me. I've only been the pastor here for 7-8 years now. Me personally, I would seek out someone like Auntie Nancy, Auntie Sylvia, to help me think about those early eras, right? If you needed a picture of something specific from some point in the history of the church, who would you talk to? Right? Like, I know where those pictures are located, but if I need to know something specific, I'll tell you who I'm going to go to. I'm going to go to Auntie Lila, right, and ask her where I can find that specific picture, because she has undertaken all of that work to organize those photo archives for us. Think even, about our simple rhythms pre-COVID. If you had a question about worship, who would you talk to? Auntie Al. If you had a question about Sunday school, who would you talk to, right? Kind of depends there, right? Maybe you talk to Albert about that, or maybe you talk to Uncle Harry. You have a question about something, how something works at church, right? Uncle Walt. Baby questions, all the aunties at church, right? Fellowship question, Uncle John, right? We have all of these kinds of insiders in our communities, right? And they're essential, in a lot of ways to the things that we do. I appreciate all of the ways like doors are opened to relationship as we are able to leverage that insight and that insider knowledge of who we are and the things that we do. But as with anything, there are healthy and then there are like unhealthy approaches to these types of community roles, right? An insider, if they're open and they're free with their information they hold, there's like they help form solid relationships with the organization and with the folks who like become associated with the organization. Now there is like a touch of power that is linked to this inside knowledge, and that power can sometimes go to our heads, right? You go back to that map from Harlem. I bet there were a lot of bouncers at those clubs who would all be seen as insiders, and I bet you there's a fair few of them that made their nice little side cash, right? Money given by people who are trying to grease the wheels a little bit, right? I want to get into this club, here you go, buddy. Now I'm not saying that the next time you want to find out something about John Stockett or Moses Yu that you need to grease the wheels with Auntie Nancy, right? But we all see where the insider, goes from something that is healthy, and essential to the, nurtured formation of the community to becoming almost like a wall preventing people from fully participating in the community rather than like that integral connector that helps others integrate. When we get into that mode, we really become gatekeepers, right? We're the person at the door who's letting certain people in, certain people out. And the Christian church is really notorious for the work of gatekeeping. In the spaces where Jesus says, follow me, there's a reputation in the Christian church to shut doors, right? And prevent others from fully participating in the worship and the love and the grace of the church. The Nazarene world is filled with these examples, and frankly, they're not great examples. A long time ago, movie theaters were off limits. We would shut doors to people over going to the movies. Smoking, drinking, kind of bad habit, addictive, things like that. They have prevented people from joining membership, and right now, the church's stance towards the LGBT community is marked by the doors that are closed because of a human sexuality. And even doors are being closed to some in ministry who see that particular gate as being something that's not in line with our theology. When gatekeeping becomes more important than following Jesus and the voice of the Father, right, we've really missed the mark. And we see that in our passage today. Right now, when we're looking at the words of Jesus, we're looking at like the early words or like the early parts of his ministry. Mark 3, he's barely started. And so the folks are trying to really wrap their minds around the words that he's sharing. Are they filled with truth, or are they full of, something else, right? What they don't understand in that moment is that they're actually in the presence of the Lord. They're in the presence of the Son of God. So the things Jesus says holds tremendous weight. And if he says something that challenges what they think is true, he's not blaspheming or telling a lie against God. It is that God is changing what is broadly considered to be true. Right? And that's where they really struggle, because they've been taught to know what is written and to follow what's written rather than to listen to the source of truth. And that's a massive change for the people of biblical times, right? They have had the law of Moses for thousands of years, and they could easily try to trap Jesus in their knowledge of the law. But instead, they keep trying in this passage to prevent him from going past their lines, their standards of what is right and wrong. First they wonder, where he gets his power. Like maybe he's just, spouting off crazy stuff. Maybe he's in league with Satan and he's casting out demons in this weird deal with the devil, right? And Jesus points out the absurdity of their claim, to which, there was someone in the back that was just saying, it's just what an agent of Satan would say, right? And then next, it's his mom and his family trying to call him into the house, right? And just to give a little context, your parents have probably done this with you, right? They likely heard those stories that, he was saying and how people were receiving them. And then they heard, the potential jingle jangle of the chains that they were going to lock this person up because he's blaspheming, right? And more likely than anything, they're just looking out for what they assumed was his well-being, right? So because they had the idea, right, or the right idea or the right heart behind their intentions, Jesus just lets them off really easy, right? Well, no. Jesus talks about them like they aren't even his relatives, right? They aren't his mother or brothers. He's kind of rude to them. It's like he doesn't know them at all. And then turning to those who are sitting around him, he was able to say confidently that to those folks, right, you are my mother and my brothers. It's kind of rude, to his real mom, who's probably standing right there, and to his brothers, right? They could take it. But there is kind of a key difference in the two groups that we see here. One group is trying to make him close his mouth, come inside before he embarrasses himself. The other group is like right there around him and soaking up the words that he's speaking. They're listening to him. One is treating him like they manage and they control him. The other is treating him like the time that he has for them as a gift. Now, hopefully, in that kind of biased description of this, what's going on here, you can see which group is right and which group is kind of, not right. If not, and you're struggling with it, think of like that time where Jesus visits Mary and Martha. Or think about Jesus inviting himself into the house of Lazarus when, there's all of these good Pharisees that he could invite himself into. Or think about when Jesus scolds Peter when Peter believes he can prevent Jesus from going to his death. Right? The lesson today is that we don't put Jesus in a box as if he's ours to control. If we've got the inside scoop, we also need to know the direction that God intends to move. If the heart of our walk as a disciple is marked by the listening, we are definitely going to find ourselves around that table rather than demanding from the side that Jesus stop talking. It's a good time, I think, for us to stop speaking for Jesus and begin listening to God's voice and following what that voice is telling us to do.